HRTM 270 ServSafe Study Guide Exam Questions. A nursing home food manager best protects the elderly residents' health by serving pasteurized apple cider. To ensure proper hygiene when handling food, it is important to have an approved handwashing sink. Large ice crystals in a case of frozen poultry indicate that the product has been thawed and refrozen. When installing tabletop equipment on legs, the space between the base of the equipment and the tabletop must be at least 4 inches. A food handler with long hair should cover it with a restraint. True or false, parasites are commonly associated with seafood. True. What temperature must TCS food be reheated to if it will be hot held? 165 F. Hot food must be received at or above a temperature of 135 F. A person arrives at a restaurant claiming to be a health inspector. What should the manager ask for? The inspector's identification. When installing equipment on the floor, that will be on legs or caster, the equipment must be how tall from the bottom of the equipment to the floor? 6 inches. To deny pest food and shelter in outside dining areas and around your operation, it is important to mow the grass. Which potential biological food safety hazard does smoking in food storage and prep areas cause? Smoke and pollutants are dispersed in the air. If chemicals are transferred to secondary containers, the secondary containers must be labeled with the chemicals. Usage instructions. What device prevents backflow when a hose is connected to a faucet? Air gap. The regulatory authority must be notified if a food handler is diagnosed with an illness caused by Salmonella typhi. New staff must be trained in the critical areas of personal hygiene, cleaning and sanitizing, controlling time and temperature, and preventing cross-contamination. The best way to prevent pests from becoming a problem in an operation is to use baits and traps in potential problem areas. A food handler in a high-risk population facility reported to a manager that he has been diagnosed with Norovirus. He can return to work after local regulatory authority approval and medical clearance. A food handler has been vomiting. The food handler should not return to work until symptom-free for at least how many hours? 48. Which technique is acceptable for cooling TCS food? Breaking larger portions into smaller portions to speed up the cooling process. At what maximum internal temperature should cold TCS food be held? 41 F. When washing hands, what is the minimum time you should scrub with soap? 10 seconds. After which activity must a food handler wash their hands? Clearing tables. How should live shellfish be received? At a max air temp of 45 F and cooled to 41 F or lower within 4 hours. Pesticides should be disposed of by the PCO. A safe way to cool a stockpot of meat sauce is to put it into a sink of ice water. How long can ready-to-eat TCS food that was prepared in-house be stored if it is held at 41°F or lower? 7 days. Toothpicks and beverage stirrers are classified as single-service articles. Which plumbing device helps prevent a backflow? Vacuum breaker. Bake sausage stuffed mushroom caps must reach which internal temperature for 15 seconds? 165°F. What is the minimum internal cooking temperature for ground beef? 155°F. What type of smell may be a sign that cockroaches are present? Strong, oily. Leftover chili that is cooled on the counter becomes unsafe because of time temperature abuse. The minimum water temperature of the final sanitizing rinse in a high-temperature mechanical dishwasher must be at least 180°F. Which is an example of cross-contamination in a self-service area? Raw eggs added to scrambled eggs. Using coated or shatter-resistant light bulbs is a way of preventing which type of contamination? Chemical. A nursing home has prepared a roast on Tuesday for service the next day. The roast should be reheated in an oven to 165°F for 15 seconds. Preschool-age students are more likely to get sick from contaminated food because they are in the category of high-risk population. What organization creates national standards for food service equipment? NSF. A thermometer used to measure the temperature of food must be accurate to what temperature? +2°F. 3 types of contaminants that are a risk to food. Physical, chemical, biological. In which training method does a trainer ask a series of questions to draw on the knowledge and expertise of the learners? Guided discussion. What causes large ice crystals to form on frozen food and its packaging? Time temperature abuse. Which food should be stored below all others in a cooler? Raw poultry. A food handler is diagnosed with an illness caused by Shigella spp. What must management do? Contact the regulatory authority. Tableware and utensils that are not single-use must be kept at least how many inches off the floor? 6. Which feature is most important for a chemical storage area? Good lighting. When inspecting a shipment of fresh fruits and vegetables, a food handler should inspect for signs of insects. After inspecting more deliveries, which items should be rejected immediately? Fresh mussels at 51. A backup of raw sewage and significant lack of refrigeration can result in closure of the operation by the regulatory authority. How far above the floor should food be stored? At least 6 inches. What is a critical control point, CCP? An action to prevent the occurrence of a hazard. When should hand antiseptics be used? After washing hands. A thermometer in a cooler should be placed in the part that is Warmest. Cooked rice should be held at a minimum temperature of 135 F. Food preparation equipment shall be certified or classified for sanitation by an ANSI-accredited certification program. The temperature of a pot of beef stew is checked during holding. The stew has not met the critical limit and is thrown out according to house policy. Throwing out the stew is an example of which HACCP principle. Corrective actions. What is the problem with storing raw ground turkey above raw ground pork? Cross-contamination. Which item is at the correct temperature for receiving? Raw chicken breast at 40 F. An employee vomits while prepping food. What action should the manager take in order to prevent the spread of norovirus? Apply strict cleaning and sanitizing procedures. What information should a master cleaning schedule contain? What should be cleaned, when, by whom, and how? Who should apply pesticides? Pest Control Operator, PCO. At what temperature do most foodborne pathogens grow most quickly? Between 70 F and 125 F. What item must guests take each time they return to a self-service area for more food? Clean plate. Fat Tom. Food acidity, time, temperature, oxygen, moisture. In which liquid should wiping cloths be stored? Sanitizing solution. Which item can be received at 45 F? Shell eggs. Shell stock identification tags accompanying shellfish deliveries must be kept for how many days after their use? 90. What is the most reliable method for preventing backflow? Air gap. Which agency enforces food safety in a restaurant? State or local regulatory authority. In a walk-in cooler, which item should be stored on the bottom shelf? Raw poultry. Cloths for use in wiping counters and equipment shall be held between use in a sanitizer solution. Food handlers with facial hair must wear a bread restraint. When must you discard tuna salad that was prepped on July 19th? July 25th. What does an operation that wants to smoke food as a method of preservation need to have before processing food this way? A variance from the regulatory authority. All new staff should receive training on general food safety. A foodborne illness outbreak occurs when how many people get sick from eating the same food from the same location? 2. How should a food handler restrain long hair? Put all hair up under a hat. What probe should be used to check the temperature of a chicken breast? Penetration probe. What is the first step in developing a HACCP plan? Conduct a hazard analysis. What should a manager of a hospital cafeteria do if a cook calls in with a headache, nausea, and diarrhea? Tell the cook to stay away from work and see a doctor. At what minimum temperature should hot TCS food be held? 135 F. When cooling a stock pot of soup, the first step in the process should be to divide it into smaller portions. Cross-contamination can occur when a food handler uses the same ice for serving drinks and keeping beverage bottles cold. If food contact surfaces are in constant use, how often must they be cleaned and sanitized? Every 4 hours. True or false, a food handler's hands can transfer pathogens from one food to another? True. When is an operation required to have more than one type of sanitizer test kit held between use in a sanitizer solution? Water activity is a measure of vapor pressure. True or false, all pathogens need oxygen to grow? False. Shrimp for seafood salad is cooked on Tuesday, October 13th and cooled to 41 F. Cold, pasteurized crab meat is added to the cooked shrimp Thursday, October 15th, combined with chilled mayo and spices, plated on beds of lettuce, and placed in the cooler for banquet service on Friday, October 16th. What is the use-by date for leftover pan seafood salad? Monday, October 19th. Which food item should be rejected at receiving? Live shellfish without a shell stock ID tag. Biological contaminants that can result in food poisoning are: pathogens are the greatest threat to food safety. They include certain viruses, parasites, fungi and bacteria. Some plants, mushrooms, and seafood carry harmful toxins also included in this group. Biological contaminants are responsible for most foodborne illness. In the FDA's alert system, the L instructs managers to label products that are possibly contaminated. How can a food handler reduce bacteria found on poultry? Cooking poultry to the proper internal temperature. Which is the correct way to measure the temperature of milk that is delivered in a soft bulk package? Fold the package around the thermometer probe. Which method of cooling a hot pot of soup is correct? Ice bath or separate into small containers. True or false, Salmonella typhi is commonly linked with ground beef. False. Which is a requirement for key drop deliveries? The items are placed in the correct storage location. A food handler prepping a salad stops to scratch an itch on her arm and then returns to making the salad. This action can make food unsafe by poor personal hygiene. What is one way to correctly cool a 25-gallon batch of chili for later use? Reducing the amount of liquid used to cook the chili and adding ice to it after it is done cooking.